Okay, get this. What can a janitor from Vermont possibly teach a four-star general about, winning? I know, it sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But believe me, the answer is one of the most powerful and surprising lessons about success you will ever hear. So let's dive in.
All right, so let me introduce you to two guys. On one side, you've got Ronald Reed. He was a gas station attendant and a janitor for his entire life. On the other side, Richard Fuscone. This guy was a Harvard-educated exec at Merrill Lynch who retired in his 40s. Now, one of them ended up with a fortune of nearly $8 million and gave most of it to charity. The other built this enormous mansion. We're talking 11 bathrooms, 2 pools, the works, and then went completely bankrupt. I have a feeling you can already guess who ended up being who.
And here's the crazy part. This story is 100% true. And it really makes you stop and think, right? I mean, the executive, Fuscone, he had it all. The best training, all the right connections, the most sophisticated knowledge you can imagine. The janitor, Reed? He read the newspaper. So what on earth was the secret sauce here? What made the difference?
Well, the answer has almost nothing to do with finance or strategy, at least not in the way we usually think about them. Nope, it all comes down to psychology. It wasn't about what they knew, it was all about how they behaved.
The author Morgan Housel just nails this idea. He says that winning with money is really a soft skill. It's not about knowing some complex formula. It's about how you handle your own fear and greed. It's how you deal with uncertainty, and maybe most importantly, how patient you can be. And that's the key, isn't it? Ronald Reed mastered his emotions. Richard Fuscone, he was completely mastered by his.
Okay, so this brings us to the first huge lesson we can learn from these two guys. And it's all about knowing when to say, okay, that's enough. It's about the incredible danger of having a goalpost that just keeps moving further and further away, that constant, nagging desire for more.
And I mean, just look at the difference here. On one hand, you have Ronald Reed, who is the definition of humility. Seriously, his friend said he drove an old Toyota Yaris and literally wore a jacket held together with a safety pin. His whole approach was just gathering wealth little by little. But then you have Richard Fuscone. His ambition just boiled over into pure greed. He took on insane amounts of debt to fund this crazy lifestyle, always chasing bigger, faster, riskier returns. And then boom, the 2008 financial crisis came along and completely wiped him out.
You see, that desire for more status, more stuff, more returns, it's such a dangerous trap. It's this game of social comparison, and it's a battle you just can't win. Someone will always have more. You could be incredibly successful, but if you keep inching those goalposts forward, you'll always feel like you're behind. And that feeling makes you take bigger and bigger risks until eventually you actually do lose. For real.
All right, that brings us to the second big lesson, which is totally connected to the first. It's the absolute critical need to prepare for when things, inevitably go wrong. Because they will.
In the world of investing, they call this a margin of safety. But honestly, it's a concept that applies to everything in life. It's just planning on your plan not going according to plan. Simple as that. It's about building a buffer, a cushion that protects you from bad luck, from crazy world events you can't control, and maybe most importantly, from your own worst enemy, your own emotional decisions.
And Ronald Reed? Oh man, he was the poster child for this principle. He lived so frugally that his savings rate was just enormous. He wasn't chasing hype or trendy stocks. Nope. He just patiently bought shares in at least 95 solid blue-chip companies he actually understood. Places like Procter & Gamble and CVS. And then he just held them. For decades, reinvesting the dividends the whole time. That kind of diversification meant that when a giant like Lehman Brothers went belly up, his portfolio barely even noticed. He had built himself an absolutely unshakable financial fortress.
But see, this margin of safety thing, it's not just about the numbers on a spreadsheet. It's psychological armor. JP Morgan had a great name for it. He called it the sleeping point. And that's perfect, right? It's the level of risk that lets you sleep at night. It lets you ride out all the chaos and volatility in the world without totally panicking. It's what keeps you in the game long enough for all that patience to finally pay off.
And hey, don't for a second think this is some quaint idea that only works for janitors from Vermont. No way. This is exactly what the most successful investors on the planet do. Just look at Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway. They hold something like $144 billion in cash. Does cash get a high return? Of course not. But that's not the point. The point is that it makes the company, as Buffett himself says, financially impregnable. It is the ultimate margin of safety.
So, okay,
We've laid out these core psychological principles for success in finance. But here's where this gets really, really interesting. These exact same mental models, these same rules of behavior, they apply perfectly to an arena with even higher stakes, the battlefield.
Think about it. The tools might be different. Stocks instead of soldiers, bonds instead of bombs. But the human element, it's exactly the same. The great military strategist Carl von Clausewitz once wrote that no other human activity is so completely tangled up with chance, emotion, and risk as war. And he said the only thing that even comes close is investing. How about that?
So what's the military version of chasing a hot, risky stock, hoping for a quick payday? Well, it's the thirst for that one glorious, decisive battle, the one that's supposed to win the entire war in a single afternoon. It even has a name. They call it the short war illusion.
And Napoleon, you could almost say he was the Richard Fuscone of the battlefield. At the Battle of Borodino in Russia, he was obsessed with total annihilation. That was his high return. And yeah, he won the battle, but it was a classic Pyrrhic victory, a win that cost him so much it was basically a defeat. He just couldn't get his goalposts to stop moving. He risked absolutely everything, and that battle marked the beginning of his long, disastrous retreat from Moscow. He had no margin for error. His enemy, on the other hand, had a much more modest, patient goal: just survive.
So you see, it doesn't matter if you're managing a portfolio or an army. The ultimate lesson is exactly the same. It's a fundamental truth about human nature that cuts across any field, any profession.
Let's look at the father of value investing, Benjamin Graham. He wrote that once you have enough knowledge and good judgment, the most important virtue of all is courage.
Okay, now listen to this. The legendary military thinker Clausewitz was asked to define a military genius. He said it was someone who, in the darkest, most confusing moments, has the courage to follow this faint light wherever it may lead. It's almost the exact same language. Chilling, isn't it? So at the end of the day, the lesson is pretty simple. Real success isn't about being the most brilliant person in the room. It's about behavior. It's about having the humility to admit you could be wrong, the patience to play the long game, and the courage to stick to your plan when everyone around you is freaking out. At its core, it's about one thing: survival.
So I'm going to leave you with a question that comes straight from the source material. In the next war or the next market crash, when everything is pure chaos and uncertainty, when fear and greed are screaming in your ear, what intellectual concepts are you going to hold on to? Because as the Janitor and the General both prove to us, those ideas, the ones you hold on to in the storm, are what will ultimately determine whether you win or lose.